Welcome to another episode of Hearthstone Hypotheticals, a show where I ask my Hearthstone Twitter some kind of question and we see what the Hearthstone community is thinking about a particular topic. Today's topic is asking, what is the best way to get better at Hearthstone? Wrong answers only. So we're going to get a lot of satire and a lot of pretty cool answers that are probably just going to make us laugh at the end of the day, but who knows, maybe you guys might learn something about how to get better at Hearthstone by learning how to play the game worse. So let's go ahead and see what the best way to get better at Hearthstone is. Wrong answers only, according to my Twitter, of course. The first reply is coming from DZonox. He is saying that switching from one deck to another, depending on which streamer you're watching today, always believing that you're going to be as good as they are playing the same deck. And this is definitely something that I fall victim to a ton. I'll see a streamer with like a deck that's like 80% win rate and like top 50 legend, and I'm like, wow, I'm as good as this player. I can definitely play this deck to the same extent. And then suddenly I'll go 0-3 and be like, wow, this deck is garbage. Better find another streamer or another deck. But pretty much what this is giving you in terms of advice is that you're not going to pick up a new deck like you know it right off the bat. Like, you're going to have to give it some practice. You're going to have to see some synergies you may not have initially saw when you first glossed over the deck. And just, it takes a while in order to master a deck and not screw up, because it's very obvious whenever you misplay with a new deck and you're like, wow, why is this deck not performing the way that it's supposed to? I thought this was a good deck. What the hell, Pheno? You're playing Miracle Druid and I can't replicate the same results. But just take a little bit of patience with the deck that you're playing, and pretty soon you will become a master at it. It just takes a little bit of patience. Roman is saying to play against the Innkeeper in normal practice mode. That will give you great training and an accurate idea of how your deck performs in the current meta. Besides, you will get in-game metrics of your performance without needing third-party options. Jesus, this is a lot of stuff all in here, because first off, playing against the Innkeeper is definitely the worst way to experience Hearthstone, because the AI literally doesn't play the game the way that it's supposed to. They just play out their cards and they don't think about their order a lot of the time. The other thing to keep in mind is, yeah, definitely not a great accurate representation of the Hearthstone meta, because they have cards like Elven Archer, and I even think that they have some old cards that were taken out of the classic set just because they didn't want to mess around with the decks. I could be wrong about that. But third-party options is definitely something you want to get into in Hearthstone if you don't already have a deck tracker, so that way you can properly analyze your outs and maybe like the hand reading aspects of deck tracker are also very useful, so that way you can not forget when your opponent randomly discovers a card, so you can kind of, you know, assume whether or not it's a card that's in their deck versus being random. But if you're not using a deck tracker, I would highly recommend it. Joshua is saying to reject the prescription win condition. Who says the goal is to reduce your opponent's HP to 0? I've convinced myself it's time to get my opponent to reduce mine to 0. Haven't lost a game since. Joshua, it sounds like you're a filthy priest main. And well, this would definitely be the way to play a filthy priest game, because good lord, you don't really kill your opponent. They'd have to kill you somehow, and you have infinite healing essentially. And with all the random generation, let's be honest, it pretty much does feel like random healing. So Joshua is pretty much telling you that if you guys want to be good at the game, you better pick up Anduin. Lazy Peon is saying to shove as many legendaries into your deck as possible. Legendaries equals skill. Guy Grumpy is actually an upcoming streamer from Hype Horizon. I believe he's actually co-CEO or part founder of the team or something. But he actually does this weekly, monthly stream where all he does is just put legendaries into his deck. And well, it is definitely the coolest, most expensive deck that I've ever seen, but it's not going to be the most powerful. I feel like if you're ever going to play like a full legendary deck, it's just going to be a mage deck, because you have cards like Luna's Pocket Galaxy, which can essentially high roll the game. I mean, I still don't think that's the way that you should build that kind of deck, but it definitely goes with the theme of trying to become better at Hearthstone with only wrong answers. A legendary deck is a great way to flex on somebody, and if you have a lot of cheaper legendaries you can throw out at the beginning of the game, that will definitely help you out. But if you want to flex on your opponent, this is definitely the way to do it. Cheese Paladin Connoisseur Conway saying to play Murloc Druid until you hit Legend for the first time. It teaches tempo, initiative for those at Vicious Syndicate followers, and it teaches how to deal with losing, and if that fails, you can read Meaty's pinned tweets. For those of you who don't know, Meaty is a very prominent Hearthstone player who's almost made it to World Qualification every now and again, being like 1 or 2 placements off from making the cut, and he's just a really solid Hearthstone player. Every now and again, he will post some tips and some advice on how to improve your Hearthstone game, because it's all about it's all about how you plan the structure of your turns, not just playing out every single turn. with the resources that you have in your hand. It's all about planning it out and knowing what you're reaching towards versus just, you know, oh, I have this much mana, let's just play all the green cards. Media is a great resource in the Hearthstone community to where this is 100% serious, by the way. This isn't me being facetious or being sarcastic. But Media is a solid player if you're looking for someone to follow in the Hearthstone scene on Twitter. I would definitely recommend that. But yeah, going back to the post, all you need to do is just play a deck that teaches you how to play, and then you can learn anything else from there. Because the first thing you need to learn in Hearthstone is tempo. I do agree with that. Then you do have to learn how to deal with losing. This is pretty much another true thing in Hearthstone, because I believe Meaty is the one that said this in one of his tweets. He said 25% of the games you are not going to win, 25% of the games is going to be impossible for you to lose, and 50% of the games your decisions actually matter. So if you don't know which of those percents that you're currently in at the moment, then that can definitely, you know, tilt you whenever you lose a game that you didn't know was unwinnable. So definitely understand where your Hearthstone games are coming from, and definitely understand why you're structuring your turns so that way you can be a better tempo player. Flying Kraken is just to say to go to a website, click on the highest winning deck, jam that deck based on all results on the deck I'm playing. So pretty much, yeah, just go to HSReplay, see what the best deck is. It's probably going to be a Shaman or Hunter deck, and then you just jam that deck until you get frustrated. And even if you have like a 45% win rate, don't worry. Your variance will eventually curve out, and you will get that coveted 55-60% win rate that you are hoping to get. All you got to do is just keep jamming and bashing your head against the wall while you're playing ladder, and eventually you will get that win rate, right? That's what people would want you to believe. Future GM Kales Luna is saying to remove pesky low win rate when kept cards such as Alexstrasza Lifebinder and Il'gynoth from your deck so you never have to get them in your opener. Dude, this is big brain advice coming from a GM. Keep in mind, this guy's playing at the top, the pinnacle of Hearthstone esports. So clearly, he wouldn't be giving this bad advice to us for no reason, right? Alexstrasza's a 9-mana 8/8 that doesn't get played for 8 turns. So that's automatically a garbage card whenever you draw it. And Il'gynoth, you literally can't play until the very end of the game. So why do you need him in your hand ever if you're not actually killing your opponent? Both of these cards are garbage. Do not put them in your deck. All they're going to do is just ruin your tempo and your aggro lineups. And so what should you do? Just play aggro, play early cards that you can always play, and if your opponent clears them, just call him an idiot. That's all you got to do. Applecat is saying the golden rule of Hearthstone is to always take Reddit's advice. If you want to net deck from there, make sure that it's a well-crafted meta breaker with a game 6 sample size in platinum. This is definitely a good way of being able to be debated online yet again, except this time, instead of going to an official website that focuses only on Hearthstone stats, you're going to a website that only focuses on Hearthstone feelings, because let's be honest, Reddit only makes things a problem when they really are angry about something one way or another, whether it is something within the game or something about the game. But if you really want to be a true Chad, definitely go on to Reddit, see what they are saying is the best deck, because I'm pretty sure that Reddit was complaining about Ticketus back when Ticketus's win rate was just absolutely garbage. So clearly, Reddit is always the golden chalice of meta advice in Hearthstone. Daniel is saying to just watch GM. And I'm glad that he didn't say America's GM, because then I would have known for sure that he was being facetious. But this can be taken in a literal and in a joking way, because there are some GMs that play the game very, very perfectly, but just because they are a GM does not mean that they are absolutely perfect at Hearthstone. We've seen this plenty of times throughout GM. There's been some questionable plays, some very weird risk-taking that has been taken every now and again. The very first thing I can think of is from Briarthorn. Every now and again, he would have some suboptimal plays, and some people would be like, what is going on here? But other than that, GM is actually a great place in order to watch competitive Hearthstone if you're wanting to improve your gameplay. But the biggest thing about GM is there's a lot of other things that it does pretty badly for the competitive scene of Hearthstone. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I just wanted to say that this was definitely a perfect answer for the serious aspect and the meme aspect of this question. Jason is saying to craft cards day one of an expansion. And well, honestly, Jason, this is pretty much in the air in whether or not this is good or bad advice. Because how am I going to be able to play with the new cards and see if they're broken if I don't craft them day one? I have all of these cool decks that I want to play. I have all these wacky combos that I know I'm going to get killed on turn 3 against. Why should I not have the need to waste all of my dust on day 1 memes so that way I can properly play the game? And then on day 2, I look at my cards and I'm like, oh my god, what have I done? I have nothing. I have nothing. I literally have nothing, and I've crafted everything that doesn't freaking matter. So Jason does have a legitimate point here, because you don't want to waste all of your dust on day one. But for somebody like me, I just can't help it, dude. I seriously cannot help crafting all of these memes on day one, because all I want to do is have fun and maybe break the meta like this guy's Toast did with Shutterwalk on the first day of the Witchwood. One of these days, I might be able to do something like that, but how can I ever achieve that if I don't craft the cool cards on day one? El Tino is saying to just play Magic. Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone are clearly the same exact game. The mana systems are completely different, but it doesn't even matter. Mechanically and RNG-wise, Magic is literally the exact same thing as Hearthstone, just on a paper medium. So if you know how to play Magic, you easily know how to play Hearthstone, because who cares about drawing lands? When you have all the mana in the world in the Hearthstone, you have one less aspect to think about. So therefore, if you're a god at Magic, you're going to be a god at Hearthstone. And who's the perfect example than this other than Brian Kibler? There's your example. Go ahead. Think of another one. I bet you can't, because Brian Kibler is the first one that comes to mind. There's a lot of Magic players that play Hearthstone, but regardless, Brian Kibler is the go-to, because he won the World Championship in Magic the Gathering, and although he didn't win like the most prestigious tournaments in Hearthstone, he definitely appeared at them, and honestly, casting the World Championship is definitely up there in my eyes. So play Magic the Gathering if you're looking to get interested into Hearthstone and maybe even become a pro at it. Future GM Dmitry Kazov is saying to remove their tempo while developing your own, especially against weapon decks. The classic advice from Jay Alexander back when Weapon Rogue was a problem, and he said, just remove their tempo while developing your own, even if your opponent is a stealth weapon deck that has no minions on the field, so how are you ever going to remove their tempo? This is good advice on paper until you realize that there are some decks that you can't really actively remove their own tempo. I'm sorry, like to where you can't remove their tempo while developing your own, because there are decks like Priest that exist. Literally, there's a lot of decks that are out there that don't do anything and don't have a minion, so how can you remove their options when you are the one that's behind and you're the one that has to start knocking in order to actually win the game? So, I mean, this is definitely good advice, but it's a huge meme in case you guys are not aware of it, and it was due to the deck that I was talking about earlier, Weapon Rogue with Pinflingers, but yeah. Removing tempo is definitely a good thing in Hearthstone, but whenever you hear this phrase, they're probably not being serious, or they're probably not giving you actually good advice. Montu is suggesting to learn from your favorite Hearthstone creator, Monsanto. And honestly, if you guys have not seen this series from Monsanto, I will leave this link down below for you guys, because this is honestly exactly what this tweet is going for. It's going for, like, a sarcastic, funny approach of trying to make some Hearthstone content. And Monsanto is probably like the best dry humor comedian out there in the Hearthstone world, because good lord, Monsanto just, I don't know what it is about his sense of humor, but it hits it on the nail perfectly every single time. And he's got like this series on YouTube where he just literally puts on a hat and he just honestly talks some Hearthstone shit. So it's pretty funny if you want to go deeper into the competitive scene and get a little bit more in touch with some of the content creators and the people behind it. But I would highly recommend this video, because you could actually learn one or two things from it, from somebody that actually has played at the World Championship while also having a good laugh with him. Because Monsanto, your videos are hilarious, and I want to see some more of them. So if you're somehow watching this video, I want to see another episode here pretty soon. Barbud of Ricky is saying just to change your deck every single game. And honestly, I literally used to believe the sentiment, because I was like, well, if I play a different deck every single time, then it really doesn't matter, because I'm going up against a random deck every time, if you think about it, because that's how ladder works. Well, unfortunately, this doesn't really help you if you don't play every single deck that you queue perfectly, because it's not about whether or not you're increasing your matchup odds, it's about whether or not you're playing the deck correctly. And if you're not playing a deck correctly, even if you have a good matchup, you could just absolutely throw a game, and that's going to make you feel even worse. So if you want to practice a whole bunch of decks, feel free to change your deck every single game, but if you're looking to actually increase your ranks and you're just getting upset that Shaman's just getting rolled against whatever matchup that you're not happy against, switching your decks is not going to make that feeling any better, because Priest is going to have something that feels very similar to that, even though you may not agree with that. Priest is very broken, but when you queue to a Priest mirror, you'll definitely feel that. Warlock going up against anything right now definitely just sucks. But no matter what class that you're playing, there's going to be a weakness, there's going to be strengths, but you just have to find that sweet middle ground to where you can gain some ranks while also not just driving yourself crazy. Appa is going with a slightly different direction of going towards competitive Hearthstone events and saying that you just got to get yourself a basic lineup, claim that it's the nuts on Twitter, scrub out of the event, and then blame RNG or blame your luck. And honestly, I've seen a lot of people do this a lot throughout the Hearthstone community, and it's part of the reason why I love being on the Twitter, because I love it when people are like, this is the best lineup, why aren't you guys playing these 120 cards, this is going to win the event, and then they go 0-2 and being like, I had the most unfun games of Hearthstone I've ever played, I didn't think this would ever happen to me. And honestly, it's going to happen to somebody. There have to be losers if there's going to be winners in these kind of events, and there are going to have to be people that go 0-2. But it's especially hilarious whenever you see somebody be like, I am winning this tournament, and there is no one who's going to stop me, and then suddenly they go 0-2, and it's like, it's the most anticlimactic thing in the world, honestly, and it definitely doesn't feel good to be on the receiving end of that, so I do sympathize with people that have had that. Trust me, I've been there. But Appa definitely hit it on the nail here. Competitive Hearthstone has a lot of wrong answers only whenever it comes to advice. So just thought I'd share this one with you, because you never know when you might need to hear a few things you may not have heard of before. Competitive player Arok is saying to focus on the result. If you win, you played well. If you lose, you played bad. Don't forget that. And honestly, this is true and also not true, because if you play well in Hearthstone, you should debatably win the game. But there have been plenty of times where I've played suboptimally, made misplays, just straight up misordered cards, and I still won the game anyway. So don't forget that. There's lots of ways that Hearthstone can, be Hearthstone, be random, and essentially be this crazy thing that feels like it's impossible to replicate, and then every now and again it feels like every other Hearthstone game that you play is just literally the exact same 4 cards in some sort of different order. But the important thing to take away from here is, if you want to get better at Hearthstone, all you have to do is just make sure that you played well. Don't worry about your opponent. Just focus on the aspects of the game that you had control over, and if there was anything you could have done differently, remember that for next time, because Hearthstone is a game that's all about managing what routes you go on, and if you go down the wrong route, well, when you're back at that same place in another game, you can choose to go the other route and see where it leads you. So this is both sarcastic and really good advice from Arok. But just know that if you focus on your own way of winning, you're going to increase your win rate tremendously. Don't focus on your opponent, focus on your plays. We got another vote saying to read the Hearthstone Reddit. That's definitely the most ideal place to get some Hearthstone deck lists. But if you want some more Hearthstone deck lists, you can just go to HSReplay, watch it, and say it's worth it. Because, the best deck right there, I'm pretty sure, is a Shaman deck as of right now. And honestly, I'm about to play Shaman here later today to see how good it is on the ladder, because I really haven't played the deck since Shaman's been buffed. Just hasn't been a deck I've been that interested in. But HSReplay is a good website to use. Just watch out whenever you're reading statistics, because you need to understand where these statistics come from and who these statistics come from. Because if you're seeing statistics of a deck at like Platinum 9 and you're not, if you're looking at a deck from like Silver 9 or something like that, the lower ranks, and then you look at like Platinum or Diamond and then eventually Legend, you'll be able to see it across all spectrum of the Hearthstone, not just one specific area. So you just need to know where your stats are coming from. That's the biggest piece of advice I can probably give you in today's video. This next one I think was the most popular out of the entire post, and it's coming from Steven Georgiou, Cora's dad, yet again. He's saying, I would like to play with permadeath rules. I create a new account, buy all the cards, and then play standard. If I lose a match, I must delete the account and start over. It really raises the stakes and makes sure I'm always doing everything I can to win. Well, Steven, you want to know what you just suggested? You just suggested a shadow game. You literally want to suggest shadow games in Hearthstone, and I could not be more on board with this idea. Like, this pretty much is along the lines of what happens when Yogg plays Rod of Roasting, because if you read the card carefully, it doesn't say cast until a player is defeated. It says until a player is dead, until a player dies. That's not the hero. That's not Anduin, Jaina, or anyone from there. That's you, the player. So, who knows, man? Maybe we're getting some direction into where shadow games are going to be a thing in the future. But, I mean, This is a really funny idea. This is probably not the best advice because, you know, first off, you have to literally gain a whole new account and then lose it if you lose even one match. Like, this is like Arena to the absolute max, except it's your entire collection. But Shadow games definitely sound interesting for me. I would definitely play the role of Merrick Ishtar. No, like any day, man. I would do that any day because that was just the anime that I grew up with. I'm a complete weeb in that aspect. Feel free to make fun of me. I don't care. But Permadeath Hearthstone, it's definitely a funny thing to say the least. Random internet weirdo is suggesting to slam your items early, always play the strongest board, have a plan for the late game, leverage your econ to snowball, pretty much whether or not your minions survive every single turn, and know when to go all in. Honestly, this is all really good advice. Like, you gotta know when to play your cards early, when to play your strongest board, when to have your late game, when to have the leverage of forcing your opponent to play specific answers that they need to kill your stuff while also not playing into that, and knowing when to go all in. Honestly, this is all really good Hearthstone advice. The biggest thing I would say is slamming items early maybe not be the greatest thing depending on the deck that you're playing. But if you're playing a deck that's all about tempo, you need to use every single turn to try and initiate to kill your opponent. Playing against Priest, it's still kind of the same thing, unfortunately, because you can't always play around their options. Some Priest players may disagree with this take, but sometimes I feel like you can't play around random. But regardless, this is actually all really good advice. I was looking for a way to kind of make fun of this, but I mean, all of this is pretty good advice. Like, you got to know when to play your tempo, pretty much what this means. You got to know when to play your strongest board. I mean, this is one is saying always play your strongest board, but if you're playing a tempo deck, you kind of need to do that a lot of the time in order to kill your opponent as fastly as possible. Obviously, play around cards if you can. Have a plan for the late game. Pretty much after your strongest board doesn't win the game, you have the late game for later in case you need it. Leverage your econ to snowball, very similar to how you have to manage your resources. And then you got to know when it's time to just go all in and when you have to just go for it, otherwise your window might close. So, random internet weirdo Taco Cat HS, you definitely get the reward for probably the best answer for today. At least in terms of serious advice. Paper Ninja is saying just to save your mana. And if you're playing Priest, then obviously this works, right? Because if you save your mana, then that means that you'll have mana for next turn, right? No? That mana doesn't carry over? Oh. Then why do we want to save our mana, Paper Ninja? It's almost like you're giving me bad advice and wrong answers only. I love the idea, man. This is definitely a good take because if you don't play your mana in Hearthstone, all you do is lose it. Like, this is essentially, this is a take, I would say, that most competitive players have where it's like, why aren't you playing your cards? Why are you saving your mana unless you have a very specific reason for wanting to hold on to this card? Like, Meaty and Paradox have kind of taught me this lesson. Paradox more so than Meaty because I've actually sat down in games with him where he's like, why do we want to hold on to this card? Why are you waiting to initiate on your opponent when you're the one that has to kill them? Or in the other situation, when you literally need to defend against the opposition. So it's just like saving your mana a lot of the time just isn't the way to go unless you have a very specific reason to be holding on to that card or not committing a minion. So just always remember that if you're saving a card in Hearthstone, it most likely is not the best thing to do unless it's a card like Il'gynoth and it has a very specific reason or very, very specific way of being played. So just understand why your cards are being played and you will see a tremendous spike in your win rate. This next one is going to be very quick because there's really not much to say about this, but One Arm is saying to take some advice from your opponent. Just play faster. If you play faster, you won't get these rage ads, right? So you don't have to worry about these awful people throwing out their bad day against you just because you thought 1 or 2 seconds longer about your turn. So apparently if you don't want to be called an asshole or anything along these lines, just play faster and you won't have to worry about rage ads, right? If only it were that easy, because they're still going to get upset when I beat them. Greg Zor is saying to get wasted before a session. That helps a lot. This is not something that I would recommend, but I'm going to tell you guys one particular instance where Luker HS actually suggested to me to drink at least 1 or 2 beers before playing Hearthstone because it will make you be less paranoid about some of the options. And honestly, I can kind of relate to that. I have played Hearthstone slightly intoxicated before. Nothing like full on like drunk or anything. Like, you can't think in a card game if you're not there mentally. But if you drink like 1 or 2 beers before playing, then it actually like kind of like cools you down and chills you out a little bit. So that way you're just kind of looking at the cards. You might be a little bit slower on some of your plays, but you think a little bit less. And sometimes if you're playing a deck like Shaman or a deck like Face Hunter, you sometimes just need to not be too paranoid about what your opponent's options are. You just have to play the best turns you have every single turn. And if they have the answer, they have the answer. So like obviously you don't want to get wasted before each session. But there are some players that actually used to drink before events for literally the reason that I just described. Another way that you could do this is you could take the McB approach. McB, if you're watching this video, I absolutely love you, my guy. But what he would do is he would treat Hearthstone tournaments like vacations almost, and he would just, he would drink. He would drink a lot and play a lot of fun Hearthstone, and I'm pretty sure that during one of these events he actually was able to be live while playing one of the decks. I don't think he was like 100% wasted or something like that. But regardless, he had a lot of fun just drinking with the boys, playing some card games, and just being a part of the Hearthstone scene. Like, McB is one of the best people that I've ever met in the scene. One of the coolest people to hang out with outside of just playing card games. And the guy's just helped me out a lot. He's really thrown a lot my way in terms of, like, boosting up my my self-esteem and my self-worth. So definitely got to give the shout to McB there. But if you're wanting to somewhat, like, curb your paranoia on Hearthstone, drinking one drink is not the end of the world because you're going to be somewhat coherent unless you're just a lightweight like me. Dave is suggesting to not log into the game because I have not lost a game since I stopped logging in. And I mean, if you're tired of losing Hearthstone games, the only way to guarantee that you will never lose another game is to just stop playing the game altogether. And well, that may not be something that I 100% suggest. If you're looking to stop losing a game, maybe you should take a break. There's been some times where I will literally just like take a break from Hearthstone for like a day or two because of like a certain game that I like really throw. And I take Hearthstone losses and like throws very seriously because I like to play the game to the best of my ability, and it just upsets me personally whenever I do something very obviously dumb. But I mean, taking a break from the game is not necessarily a bad thing. I love the sarcasticness of this approach, but taking this in a more serious light, I would say that if you guys just need to stop playing Hearthstone for a little bit, that's okay. Like, you can take a day or two or a week off the game and then wait for whatever changes need to happen, because Hearthstone's always changing. It's always warping or being evolved in some way or another. Evolving, pun intended for Shaman, of course. But yeah, dude, like, if you just need to take a break, there's nothing wrong with that. Domjat is suggesting that when you're on a loss streak, just keep playing. You're sure to spring back even further at some point. And well, this is true and not true, because you got to understand why you're losing a Hearthstone, you know? If you're clearly mad and you're not making the best turns when you're supposed to, you're not going to win your games. It's as simple as that. But just because you're on a loss streak doesn't mean that you're not going to eventually get back on that win streak. But you have to understand why you're losing. Going back to what I was saying earlier about understanding your structure of your turns. So if you're wanting to get better at Hearthstone, you're gonna have to lose a few games every now and again, but you need to understand why you're losing those games. Why is this loss streak happening? Is it because you're getting a bad matchup? Are you playing your outs wrong? Are you just straight up throwing the game? Like, there's a reason for it. And kind of like what I was saying earlier with media's advice, 25% of the games you're going to guaranteed win, 25% of the games you're going to guaranteed lose, and only about 50% of the games you will actually have your decisions matter. So if you can identify that and understand, wow, I just lost the 1 and 4 times in a row, sometimes that can happen. That's just literally variance. However, the biggest thing to take away from here, don't be tilted and don't queue on tilt, because that is going to make your loss streak even worse. You're going to blame something. You're going to point at a card and be like, fuck this card. I absolutely hate it. Screw this class. I never want to see it ever again. And you just got to make sure that you're not blaming other people for something that's 100% your fault. So if you're on a loss streak, keep playing, because eventually you will spring back up. That just is how stats work. Kuntig is suggesting something for Druid players out there. Do you wish that your guardian animal minions had more stats? Just add Embiggen into your deck. And just like that, you have a 0 mana card that increases the mana cost of your minions by 2 and gives all of your minions in your deck +2/+2. However, guardian animals will not pull them out from your deck because you literally just increase the mana cost of these cards. And I'm assuming that if you're running cards For guardian animals, they're already reaching that 5 mana threshold that the card requires for you to actually recruit the minions from your deck. There were some people that thought they were being omega brained by adding Embiggen into their guardian animals druid when this deck first came out, and it was definitely hilarious to see it in action. So just be aware that if you're gonna play something like guardian animals, the mana of your minions is also important. You're not just pulling out the same cards every single time for no reason. Embiggen will ruin that combo. Just don't do it. Caster Gia is suggesting to always value trade, AVT as it used to be called. If you guys aren't familiar with this meme, this is actually a throwback to some Hearthstone videos that were made back in like 2017, 2018, and there was one video that came out where a player suggested to always value trade. And what value trading is, say you have a 2-3 and a 3-3. Your 3-3 attacks a 2-3 and your 3-3 survives at 1 HP. That is a value trade because now that 3-1 is going to be able to attack into something else and essentially double the damage that it did because it effectively dealt 6 damage outside of just the original 3 for attacking once. And well, while this mechanic and this strategy is very good in a lot of different ways, it doesn't mean that you always value trade. What if you literally have lethal in the field? Are you supposed to value trade in that instance? What if you're an aggro deck playing up against a control deck? Do you just value trade there in order to prevent your opponent from getting even more value? No, they're just going to completely destroy you. So Gia definitely hit it right on the nail with this one. This one literally made me laugh out loud because I remember watching this video back in 2018 and being like, dude, this is some of the worst Hearthstone advice you can give to somebody, because the biggest thing that you don't want to do when telling somebody how to get better at the game is you don't want to give them absolutes. Like, there are combos that are absolutes because they have to be played, you know, in combination or in a specific order. But whenever you have like a rule like always value trade, always go for the discover, that kind of thing, you're completely throwing nuance and situations out of the window, and you're just assuming that this rule is the go-to. Hearthstone is a very different, very situational game compared to some of the other card games that are out there, and if you don't play your outs properly and you always value trade, then you're going to see a massive decline in your win rate. So shout out to Gia, one of the Hearthstone Grandmaster casters, for coming out with this amazing reply. Max is suggesting to not run Polkelt and Yaraza Priest because good players always draw the good cards. And well, that is 100% true. How do you think the poker players that win millions and millions of dollars every year make their fortunes? Guess what? They draw the good cards consistently. Same thing with Hearthstone Grandmasters. Why do you think they haven't been relegated yet? Because they always draw the good cards. Why do you need something like Polkelt, which is going to nerf you as a player because you don't need this card? You're already drawing the good cards. Polkelt becomes a 5-mana 4/5 by the time that you end up being able to play it because it doesn't really freaking matter. You already have all the good stuff that you need, and this card is just an unnecessary tutor for things that you do not already need because they're already in your hand. So Max is definitely hitting it very well here because, I mean, why do we need Polkelt? We don't need tutors. We don't need anything like that. Let's just play some good old-fashioned Hearthstone and let the good player draw the good cards, because guess what? If you are a Raza Priest main, you're always drawing Raza on 5 and you're always drawing Anduin on 8. Devan is saying to never play the same game mode twice in a row. True Hearthstone masters play in this order: Standard, Dual, Standards, Battleground, Arena, Standard, Dalaran Heist. Wow, I forgot Dalaran Heist was actually a mode for a second because I don't play the single player content like at all. But honestly, this is a kind of interesting take. Obviously, this is, you know, sarcastic like all of these replies are. But a true Hearthstone master would actually master all of the game modes, right? So if you're trying to say that you're the best Hearthstone player in the world, are you really the best Hearthstone player in the world? Or are you the best Standard player in the world? Are you the best Duels player in the world? Are you the best Wild player in the world? Also, what the hell, dude? Why is Wild not on this list? Hold on a minute. I just now realized this. So this 100% can't be true because you're not suggesting players to play Wild. You want people to play Dalaran Heist before playing Wild? That's the true Hearthstone. The true Hearthstone game mode right there. It's all the cards you've ever played. Dalaran Heist is not on the same level as Wild. So, Devon, I was willing to go with you here for a second, but now I'm personally offended that Wild's not on this list. So, guys, play some Wild Hearthstone if you're going to learn anything from today's video, and I've got plenty of decks to help you out with that. So, if you need a deck list, feel free to ask me down in the comments below. Be happy to help you out. But, Wild, what's going on here, man? Why is it not on the list? Somebody earlier had said to watch GMs, but Ben Morrow is saying to watch America's GM. Somebody made the joke. Yay, America's is the lowest earning region out of everybody, which is why it's so hard to, why it's so easy to qualify. It just, I may sound salty, but it's just because it's America's, and I want to be able to cheer for my group without being made fun of. But unfortunately, NAGM just gets made fun of for the lack of prize pools that players have earned, because it's really easy to just become an American GM just by literally winning a Masters Tour. So if you guys are wondering the context behind that, that's the main reason, is that Americas are technically the lowest earning prize winners of all of the regions, and this is why this joke gets thrown around. So now you're caught up on the jokes. So let's make fun of America while also cheering it on, right? Because that's, I think, what I do best. Playgile is suggesting to completely ignore your misplays and just say that you're unlucky. Works with me very well. So all you have to do is just say that your opponent is a filthy high roller and that their decisions didn't matter because all they did was deny your win. And your win is the only thing that matters. Your opponent isn't even a person. They are literally a robot that you are going up against, and all you care about is getting that quick win so you don't have to deal with them anymore. And well, if you completely ignore their misplays, if you completely ignore your own misplays and just say that your opponent high rolls everything, then you never have to take personal responsibility. And that is another way that you can become a great Hearthstone player. Because if you completely ignore all accountability, all you're doing is just playing the same deck over and over and over again, and you're playing it the same way. So when it works, you can finally be like, yeah, guys, see, it works. And then every time that it doesn't work, you can be like, oh, dude, this is dumb. This wasn't on me. This is because my opponent did blank, 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 and blank. It's not on me whatsoever. It's not my fault. Because it's never your fault, right? It's never the loser's fault. Grandmaster Luna is saying to blindly follow HSReplay stats, and I cleverly said HSReplay says that Priest is bad, therefore Priest is fine, right? So this is just a great example of knowing where your statistics come from, because if you blindly follow the stats, you're going to find some issue one way or another. But the biggest thing to take away from here is literally Priest is saying, HSReplay is saying that Priest is 8th. And why are we seeing so many people complain about Priest if it's really the 8th best class out of all the ranks? Well, it is the 8th best class out of all the ranks, but when you take Priest in top 1000 Legend, its win rate completely changes because people lower on the ladder don't know how to play the deck. And that's just how stats work. That is one way of understanding where your stats are coming from, so you can understand why Priest has apparently a 47% win rate on Hearthstone Replay. This was a couple of days ago, so the statistic may be slightly different, but the case, the argument still stands, because you have to know where your statistics come from. I've said that a ton, but that's really what it comes down to. Why is Priest 8th place? Because people of the lower ranks don't play the deck well. That's literally it. That's the only reason that you have to know, and then you can play Priest or see it be played at top 1000 Legend, and then get a better understanding of how the deck performs. So if you blindly follow the HSReplay stats, all you're doing is just essentially saying, my opponent is really lucky, why am I doing all of this? All I have to do is just keep playing the same deck over and over again. It's like, no, understand where your stats are coming from, and you will see a massive incline in your win rate. Like, that's seriously all I'm going to suggest for you today. If you're going to learn one thing from this video today, understand where your stats come from. Tall Miz is suggesting to just choose a creature that you like. Bonus points if he does not have a minion type like Slime, and shove as many similar cards into your deck. And he is referencing his tweet where he has a 100% Slime list but a 0% win rate deck. So you have an entire deck full of oozes and ways of being able to cheat them out. So this is definitely a great way of being able to play the game, because you're really just playing it for fun at that instance, and you really just need to play Hearthstone for fun. Like, yeah, you got to win at the end of the day if you're trying to accomplish your goals, but remember, this is a game at the end of the day. You can play a deck like a Slime deck and still have fun even though you're losing, and that's pretty much like what I'm always trying to say with my wild content, is that even though I'm going for these combos, I don't care about winning. I just want to complete the combo 1 or 2 times, and then I'm done. So this is pretty much just like my way of saying that you can create your own destiny in Hearthstone. You don't always have to go for what the meta is deciding unless you're really just that focused on winning. But every now and again, it's really fun to play the game for what it's supposed to be for fun. Martian Boo is suggesting to add a one-trick tech that counters the last opponent to your deck every single time that you lose. So the great example that I used, if you lost to a weapon, just throw an ooze into your deck and you're going to have an insanely better win rate, right? This is the classic J. Alexander tech argument to where there are good tech cards, there are bad tech cards, but you can't be so fixated on the results to where you're just putting ooze in every single one of your decks because your opponent does play a weapon. And this was very, very popular during the bomb warrior meta. And honestly, I would feel like that's a meta where you do need things like ooze. But there's other weapons to where like it's just not the greatest thing in order to get rid of. But there was a weapon meta to where it felt like you needed to play ooze in some of these decks. So it's like tech cards are good, but there are some people that believe that all they do is just add another useless card into your deck that has only one way of being played. So even if you have like a situation to where you can play ooze on 2, you're not encouraged to do that because what if you need to get rid of your opponent's weapon? So that's the main reason that a lot of people don't like some tech cards, but you do need them every now and again. But adding them into your deck every single time that you lose is just a surefire way of getting yourself tilted, because guess what? You're going to add this card into your deck, you're going to go up against another deck that actually does run weapons, and then you're not going to draw the one copy of your ooze. So you might as well just play a Reno deck, hope you draw Zephyrs, and hope that you can get it from there, because adding it to your deck will work every now and again, but there are some situations to where it just doesn't. If you want my honest opinion, I think tech cards are great. I think they need to be in your deck, but it's just 100% dependent on what the meta is and whether or not it is the reason why you are losing your games. But in terms of the funny aspect of this question, you definitely can add more tech cards into your deck in order to make your deck even better, and that lines up into this next suggestion coming from Corbett, the Wild Extraordinaire, to where if you tech everything, you'll obviously win against everything. If you have an option for every single card in the meta, then you have no way that you're going to lose, right? And I literally just replied with saying that this is pretty much just Reno Lock. Reno Lock has nothing but tech cards because all this deck does is just answer a board, answer a situation, clear the weapon somehow, play Zephyrs and to kill the board again, and that's really all you need to do. And he says clearly that's what makes it the best, because Reno Lock just does what it does and clears the board over and over and over again. So sometimes tech cards can work very, very well. Sometimes tech cards can be an entire deck. So just figure out what your opponent is playing. Play Dirty Rat, counter all their minions, play Unseen Saboteur, get those random spells out of their hands so they don't get the value out of them, and just make your opponent's life a teched nightmare. And the last reply that we'll go over is Britt saying that if you want to learn how to not play the game properly, all you have to do is just watch Clark HELLSCREAM on Twitch, because guess what? I make a lot of misplays. I literally have a misplay counter, so if you guys think that I'm making a dumb misplay, you can literally make more people think that I just do nothing but play the game incorrectly. But yeah, this was definitely the most dirty way to reply to this post, and Britt, you definitely get a point for that, because this was hilarious. This was actually hilarious. I was not expecting this reply. And honestly, like, I don't play the game the best, so this is somewhat true, somewhat also not true, because every now and again I'll have a cool combo that does something. But to my discredit, because let's be honest, you always got to discredit the streamer or the YouTuber, I play a lot of bad Hearthstone. So if you're wanting to learn how to get better at the game, you can learn through my misplay, so that way you don't catch yourself in a very similar situation. Or if it's like, hey, I need to choose between option A and option B, and then I choose option A when I should have chosen option B, make fun of me for not choosing option B, because that's another way that you can make players better, is by shaming them. Shame the streamer into being like, why didn't you play this card? Or why isn't this card in your deck? You know, this card is better, right? Come on, streamer. You're better than this. And well, I hate to tell you guys, but sometimes I'm just not. And that begs the question, what does Clark think is the best way of getting better at Hearthstone? Wrong answers only. If you want my honest opinion, just play off-meta decks, because if you're playing a deck that your opponent A has no idea what's going on, B doesn't know how it's going to win, then you have the element of surprise, and that's the best thing that you can have in Hearthstone. Whenever you throw down a Yogg and Paladin, for example, your opponent's like, what the actual hell is going on here? And then a Rod of Roasting comes out of nowhere and kills them. There is nothing more satisfying than that in Hearthstone. And again, it's the mind games approach, the paranoia approach for your opponent, because they have no idea what to play around, so they're just going to hope that they play their game plan right, and then they'll play into every single one of your traps. Not going to work every single game, obviously, because you are an off-meta deck, and you're probably going to lose to the top stuff, but it is still a great way of being able to get better at Hearthstone, because think of it this way. If you're good at the off-meta stuff, then you're even better at the tier 1 stuff, right? But thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video. This was another really fun one to do, and we always have questions that are on our Twitter. So if you guys ever want to see your replies on one of these videos, feel free to check out the Twitter and see what the question of today is. Today's question is what is the coolest combo in Hearthstone? Go on, make me proud. Best and funny combos will be featured in a future video, and this one will probably be coming out in a couple of days, just because I have a lot of these videos that I have to catch up on. I've been doing a lot of different content creation, and so I just really need to just sit down for like the 3-4 hours that it'll take and get this stuff recorded. Because luckily, editing this stuff doesn't take too long. But thank you guys again for making it to the end of this episode. If you like this content, feel free to like this video. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel in order to be notified about our daily uploads. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have all for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed today's sarcastic take on how to get better on Hearthstone, and we'll see you for the next video.